Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sense of Despairing Partners. This is Monica Paulini, your podcast host. The topic today is monetization, and monetization is one of the hardest topics that um, I find. And so for a long time, I have to confess, I tried to, to dodge it just because it's really hard to conceptualize it in a realistic way, and yet to put a positive spin on it. And so, the easiest way is to try to avoid going deeper into it. But I had to think about it for a project that I was working on. And so what happened is that something sort of came to me, and I realized that, monetization is harder to find than love. And then I started thinking more about it, and these are my thoughts today. And I found them to be useful, and I hope they'll be useful to you as well. Now, let's get started. Monetization is an issue that comes up time and time again. It's a recurrent issue. If you remember, it was an issue with 3G. How do we monetize 3G? How do we monetize 4G? And then 5G. 5G, the expectations were even bigger. And then, nothing came of it. And then now it's AI. The latest one is APIs. Everything is going to be about monetization. And 6G, the question is, should we do 6G? Is there a way to monetize it? So the question is, what can we learn from the past? So first is that it's a recurrent issue, and every time is the same one. So there seems to be like a commonality here. What is the commonality, and why can't we get past it so that next time around, when 6G comes around, we do not have to face the same problems that we had to face with 5G? So the first thing is that, what do we mean by monetization? We need to, I think, redefine it, and I'm going to get to that later. However, no matter how you define it, it's proven to be elusive. It's not an easy thing. It's hard to find. And you can argue love is the same way. Many want it, but many cannot. Many want it and cannot find it. Just because you want it doesn't mean you find it. In general, in our society, both money and love are good things to have, other things being equal. So they're both positives that we want to maximize to a reasonable extent. And yet I would submit that love is easier to find than monetization. Why is it so? It's because people want love. They're willing to work to find it. They might not be perfect. They might find find it difficult. It might not work out, but they try. How much time people spend on dating apps. The difference, however, is that money is in tighter supply. So you can make a sort of generic argument that you can love is kind of is in less finite supply. So you can, on a personal level, love more or less, but money, you just have so much of it, generally speaking. You might have more than you need, but you have a certain amount. The other thing is that people look for love, but they actually try to spend less money. So when you look at it from the monetization point of view, whatever money people have, they do not want to spend it unless there is a perceived benefit. And I mean perceived benefit, not necessarily a real benefit. So you might argue that it's it makes sense to spend money on something, but if people don't think it provides a good value, they would not spend it that way. So the problem that we have in general with monetization with respect to new technologies in wireless or in telecoms is that we're trying to monetize services that have a low perceived benefit. And I think that this is something we need to accept. And it's hard to accept it. And the reason for that is that in the industry, those of us that work on technology, we love technology. And when you think about it, it's awesome. What is that we can do in wireless network that, we couldn't do 2 or 3 decades ago? The technology has made incredible progress, and we're all extremely happy about it. We all love it. We all use it. We couldn't imagine living without it. So there is clearly something really good. However, despite the fact that we all love the technology, we all love the new services, are we willing to pay for it? And the issue there, I think, is that the fact that we can do something better, we can offer a good service that it's actually inherently better than what we currently have. There are some advantages to it, yet people just don't want to pay for it. And I don't mean, people that couldn't care less because they don't use it. Even the people that our colleagues, people in the industry, am I willing to pay for it? No. When I got my 5G phone, I was happy, reasonably happy with it. It didn't do anything different than what I was doing before. Great feat of technology, but I'm not going to pay more to be able to do something a little bit better. It's just not worth it. And it's not like, I could even afford it, but, it's not really that compelling. And, when I talk to people, again, people that heavily use it, they use the technology, they even understand the technology, they're still not willing to pay extra. So the fact that a service is possible and that an operator can offer it and that it works well and that people love it, that is not sufficient to convince people to pay for it. Even if, like many people make this argument, oh, it's just going to cost 1 or 2 coffees per month. Yes, but still people have just so much money and they just don't see the perceived benefit is not that high. And I think we need to learn to live with that. And I think that the one way to think about it is that within the industry, we have an engineering mindset where we have KPIs, best KPIs, reliability, everything is like top level. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that beautiful? Yes, it is. It's really amazing, again, that the technology can deliver that. And we should try to do our best. But the subscriber mindset is completely different. The subscriber mindset is it good enough? Does it do what I pretty much need? And this, when you think about it, this is why Wi-Fi is so successful. Is it perfect? No. But it just works so well. I mean, it just works well enough to do pretty much everything you need. Same thing with a car. You might like to have the most expensive and fanciest car, but do you really need it? Not that anybody don't see the value, the beauty or, whatever of the most expensive car, but, you don't really need it. And so most people don't get in debt to buy expensive cars. I guess if you do, but by and large, you live with whatever you can afford and you're happy with it. So I think that, we shouldn't get the engineer mindset to create expectations about what the subscribers might do, because the subscriber uses the subscriber mindset when it comes to open their wallet. So, if you look at it from that point of view, you have to kind of think about, the sort of what expectations you should have and set them to be more realistic. However, does it mean that there is no hope for monetization? I would argue, no, monetization is not that, but we need to think about it differently. And let me just do a quick detour here and talk about growth rates in different sectors. because oftentimes I think that, so not only we're focused on the engineering mindset and not the end user subscriber mindset, but we also should kind of step back a little bit and look at what is that wireless and telecoms as a sector do compared to other sectors, okay? And I've used to do financial models and market forecasts where you have growth rates of 20% or even higher. I mean, back in the day when you go from zero mobile phones to covering everybody, obviously the growth rate is huge. We're not there anymore. We're getting to a point where the industry, our sector, is a mature sector, and so we need to kind of realign that. And so incredibly high growth rates are not sustainable for the long term. So if you look at, again, comparing to other sectors, NYU and Stern produce some projections, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm going to quote them and take them with a grain of salt. And it as any projection is not necessarily completely accurate. But for the growth rate for wireless is 2% and per year, and 4% for telecom services. Now, this is kind of like sobering, and in fact, many operators see their ARPUs going down. But I think that we need to kind of get to sort of accept that, and but also understand what is that entails. But again, we got to be a mature sector, and there is something good about it, because it could be worse. It could be the printing press, where you kind of don't see any it might go downhill. Doesn't look like it. And at the same time, it's also not something like travel. So the next time we have when we have the next COVID kind of thing, people might decide to stop traveling. However, they're not going to give up their cell phones. So no matter what happens, we know that people value their connectivity so much that they're not going to give back their cell phones. So there's something comforting about it. But again, we cannot expect that just because we think that 5G is such a wonderful technology, people are just going to be willing to pay twice as much because they can do all sorts of things with 5G. They expect to do it. They expect the service to get better and pretty much pay the same thing. So we need to be realistic within that. Now, one thing, however, that could change, and that where there is sort of the bright spot for the monetization opportunities, is the possibility to appropriate from other sectors. So you could imagine that, for instance, in wireless, operators. Okay, one example is that in cellular wireless, operators might start offering fixed wireless access. And basically what they do is that they get new revenues. But those new revenues are coming, basically, most of them, not entirely, but the majority of it, from other broadband operators that were not either using wireline or other wireless. So if you look at the overall telecom sector, you are basically appropriating and shifting revenues from one pot to the other, rather than creating new revenues. And so we need to kind of be careful about how you think about it. But appropriating revenues from other sectors, it's one way to increase your own revenues, so get monetization opportunity within this mature industry. The question is that might work to your advantage, in the sense that you appropriate somebody else's revenues from an adjacent sector, for instance, enterprise connectivity, things like that. But also it could be that somebody else, like hyperscalers, for instance, might appropriate some of those revenues from you as an operator. So appropriation can go both ways. So we need to be careful. So detour concluded. Let's go back to monetization. So I think that we should think about monetization in a different way, and that is instead of thinking about monetization as creating new revenue streams or expanding revenue streams, which, as we've seen, is kind of difficult to achieve because of we are in a mature sector. So it is possible that a single operator enters in the market, is doing something incredibly, it's very disruptive, it's doing things better, so they have a good growth rate, but that's at the expense of the other operators. So in general, you should not expect to have a massive growth unless you're doing something so much better than everybody else, which is by and large unlikely, or worse. So we should be thinking instead in terms of profitability. And this is something that it's more achievable, and especially in telecoms, where we have not been used to be very conservative about the expensive. So there is ways to become more efficient, and by increasing efficiency, you increase profitabilities. You don't necessarily increase revenues, but you're going to be in a better financial position. And so there is the way to one way to think about it, or one way that I think useful to think about it, is to split monetization in two types. There is direct monetization, which is making more money from your subscribers, raising, offering you services, basically raising ARPUs, or selling new services to new subscribers or existing subscribers. And then the indirect monetization, which is basically becoming more efficient and increasing profitability instead. You can think about it of getting your house in order, doing things better. And this is what you do when you pick new technology. You pick the technology that you need. So you deploy 5G where you need it, not necessarily everywhere. Maybe you don't even need it right now. Maybe you need it, a few years from now. So don't do it because you have to, or because you think you're going to get this incredible new source of revenues. Just do it when you think your network needs it. And so, the advantage of indirect monetization is that it's internal to your network, so it's inherently less risky, and it's under the control of the operator. And what I'm saying here about operators also applies to vendors in the same way. You develop a product, you know that you have more realistic expectations. So it's a similar type of approach. Although I'm referring more to operators right now. So inherently, indirect monetization is kind of a win-win situation because it allows you to be more more careful with the way you use your resources, and you are less dependent on what your subscribers want to do, because you might think that they like your service, but you don't know. They decide, not you, but you decide how efficient, like how much energy efficient, how automated you want your network. This is something that it's within the network. So this is something that it's much easier. Maybe it's even easier than love. So when you think about it, in this sort of direct and indirect monetization mindset, you kind of realize that maybe 5G is not a failure after all. This is sort of a commonplace. Some people sort of take it for granted. It's like something that you don't even need to decide, but 5G was just terrible. And when you look at it from this point of view, 5G was not was not a failure. And in the sense that from a technology point of view, it's not perfect. Like no technology is perfect, but it is delivering what was designed to do in terms of performance, in the same way that even previous technologies did. It's clearly better than 4Gs in many respects. There are some advantages to this. So if you look at it from the point of view in indirect monetization, it works if you just deploy where you need it. However, what is the failure is that the direct monetization expectations were so high. And so it's the expectation from the technology that is misplaced and then leads to disappointment and leads to the people to declare it's a failure. But it's not a failure in technology, it's a failure in expectations. And as I said at the beginning, this is just continues to happen. It happened with 3G, 4G, 5G. It's probably going to happen with AI, APIs, and then with 6G, we're just going to get into this whole argument again, can we monetize 6G? And people are going to say yes or no. You're going to have arguments back and forth forever. And then you realize that, people love 6G, but they're not necessarily willing to pay much for it. So we need to really be, more accepting of the reality that it is the subscribers that decide, not the operators. Clearly having good services and good marketing helps, but it does not resolve the issue. People are not going to traveling more just because you have more planes running around. Same logic. So the other thing is that if you focus on indirect monetization and you get your network to be ready for everything, it's a more efficient network. Then if there is a direct monetization opportunity that comes up, you still can get it. But you get it on top of what you already have. You do not plan your network spending on that. It's not predicated on that. So that if there is an opportunity, you're able to take advantage of it, but you do not, get everything focused on it, and then you realize you have no money and you are in deep trouble. So you just want to just sort of protect. So be ready for the right monetization if that happens, but be aware that it's not that likely, or that, well, it's likely that you might have some, but not as much. And so this I think it's a much better framework, to think about indirect monetization as the core of your monetization structure, and with direct monetization as something that is on top. And I think that things like private networks, sensing, non-terrestrial networks offer true advantage, true opportunities for direct monetization, because they allow operators to appropriate revenues from other sectors. However, it's not necessarily true that it is operators that are going to get those revenues. It could be some other player instead. So we don't know. And the role in general of operators is, it's evolving. But no matter what, you want to keep in mind that monetization is harder to find than love. Thank you so much for listening to my rant on monetization. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you do, do subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. Thank you so much for listening in.